Hi, I'm Tim of the 1916 Company, announcing our all-new 1916 Company app. Check out our all-new community features, including wrist time, where you can log the watch you wear, how often you wear your watches, and see a graphical representation of how you use your collection. But wait, there's more, because this wrist time feature allows you to post in real time to our live feed of user wrist shots. Our community functions also include professionally moderated discussions, all sorts of views, debate, insights into what people want to say about the watches of our times, and all your favorite features are coming back, including media, editorial from Jack Forster, video from yours truly. You can continue to build your online collection and your wish list, plus all the commercial features are back. Buy, trade, and sell through the app, browse our global inventory of pre-owned and new watches. A wrist shot could begin the process of a trade or a purchase. Find the 1916 Company app on the Apple App Store and Google.
Hello and welcome to the 1916 podcast. I'm Tim Masso here with Armand Johnston, and we are discussing sports watches. We had a lot of questions about this most popular of topics.
One that never comes up.
Yeah, we've never ever been asked this question before, and we have a couple of forwards from the field about escapements and also some questions about how they differ, Swiss lever, Omega, Rolex dual pulse. We'll address that to the extent we can, but we're going to address the sports watch thing first. And all of these were questions forwarded from the field, so it's an interactive program. Forward your questions and show topics to podcasts at the1916company.com. Okay, Armand, this is maybe the more interesting question. Not what do you have to say about sports watches, but what the hell is a sports watch?
You know, a sports watch is something that can be directly associated with the activity that you're doing. If you're diving, you wear a dive watch. If you're at the racetrack, you wear a chrono. If you're yachting, you wear a yacht timer. I think a sports watch has broadly in the modern era been designated to a go anywhere, do anything watch, which I think we've talked about in the past. And as I kind of refine my tastes in sports watches, I believe that there are dedicated sports watches now. And we talk about FB Journe with the aluminum Chronograph, for example. That's a dedicated racetrack side sports watch.
Yeah, I think it's important with sports watches to sort of carve out the different categories of them, because it's such a broad comment. It's almost like, what is an SUV? And it could be a Hummer with 9,000 pounds of mass, central tire inflation system, a million different features to get an army across unprepared terrain, or it could be like a Subaru Crosstrek that's basically a compact hatchback with like a 2-inch lift.
Yep.
So SUV is like this broad, meaningless phrase. And sports watch kind of feels the same way. So I would say you're definitely bang on for the most literal type of sports watch. You've got something that's purpose specific. You've got a Yachtmaster or Yachtmaster 2 for yachting and regatta.
Club.
You've got a Speedmaster if you're going into space. You've got
my favorite sport.
That is a very space, exactly. It's the sport of kings. It's the new Polo. Space tourism. And so you know, when sports are concerned, let's just say a chronograph's being used for like a soccer match or auto racing, or something that requires timing within a broader scope of time, essentially a stopwatch. And also for diving, which is one of those sports where you need a very specific kind of watch, something with a timer, something with a large amount of water resistance, and which has to meet an international standard, the ISO 6425. So there's less fudge factor there.
And we can get as in the weeds as we want. You know, Hublot has a golf watch. Hublot has a...
I think there are a couple of golf watches at this point. Yeah.
Yep. And, round counters, stroke counters. There's a lot of very specific sports watches out there that, maybe something that nobody asked for, but I'm happy that they exist.
Yeah, definitely. I think we'll get into that a little bit deeper. I think I'm going to give an overview of some of the categories, one of which is if there's a watch that's literally for a competitive sport, that's a sports watch. I would also say that we've started to rope in these various types of watches used for trades and professions and call them sports watches, like deep sea diving, like professional deep sea salvage, petrochemical exploration, things like that. So like Comex, the work that it does, where the Sea Dweller was created specifically for them, or a pilot where something along the lines of an IWC Big Pilot's watch was originally based on the World War II Heuer, or you could look at something like the Mark series watches from IWC created for pilots after the war. The idea there was that you'd be flying with this thing and you'd be using it professionally. Then I'm going to say there are watches that are just generally durable. So let's say an Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra. Now, it's not a dive watch. It doesn't have a rotating bezel. And basically what you can say is it's just really anti-magnetic, shock resistant, and water resistant. Very durable, but not vocational and not for a competitive sport.
This is one of those go anywhere, do anything watches. 150 meters water resistance. You have a 72-hour power reserve with most of these. So it's, it's quote unquote weekend proof, as Tudor likes to talk about, but it is not for a specific task. It's almost honestly the dressier option of sports watches.
Yeah, I would say you've got those generally durable watches that can get wet, get shocked, deal with magnetism, that sort of thing. And so those are sports watches too. And then you've got what I call sporty watches and lapsed sports watches. So we've got this notion that once upon a time, the JLC Reverso was a sports watch. Back in the era when your crystal was literally always going to be glass. Allegedly, it was created to present one side that was steel to prevent breaking the glass, and then the other side when you needed to tell the time. But I think we can all agree that by the time JLC got serious about bringing back the Reverso in the 80s, it was a lapsed sports watch. The ball had moved, the standards had changed even then, and the Reverso was now generally a dress watch and a sports watch only in retrospect. And I would say the same thing is true of sporty watches that are not designed for purpose, like the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Jumbo.
Or a Cartier Santos.
A Santos is another good example. Yeah. I would say that something like a Santos Dumont today, although it has roots as a very early pilot's watch, the Santos Dumont today is a dress watch.
Without a doubt. And I would argue that honestly, the entirety of the Santos line is a business casual to dress watch type of deal.
Yeah, I do
Not
think
to say
that
you can't wear it casually.
No, like with something like the Santos Large, it's got enough water resistance. I would almost lump it in with something like a Datejust or an Aqua Terra. Mm-hmm. But with the Santos Dumont, oh yeah, 100%. That is no one's definition of a pilot's watch today. The thing that made it a pilot's watch in 1904 was that you could wear it on your wrist when piloting a Zeppelin. Yeah. And so it was something you could read while you were using both hands to fly this kind of craft, whereas a pocket watch was going to be out of reach if you needed both hands. So Alberto Santos Dumont, before he took to fixed wing, heavier than air aviation, he would have needed that wristwatch. So I would say, yeah, you've got these lapsed sports watches like the Reverso, like the Santos Dumont, like the Royal Oak, because let's face it, that original 1972 Royal Oak, it's not for a profession, it's not for a sport, it's 30 meters, maybe 50 water resistant at best. It's got a push-down crown. It's particularly delicate because it's got an ultra-thin movement inside it. It might have been considered a sports watch only in the sense that it was sporty. And by the standards of today, I think, frankly, a Jumbo is more like a dress watch.
Totally. Delving into finishing real quick, a sports watch, let's just take the Jumbo as, kind of the idyllic sports watch, so to speak. That is finished too well to actually, not to actually be a sports watch, but you wear that out and about, you're going to pick up scratches on that very easily, very quickly. The high degree of the brush polish on the bezel, the high polish on the bezel flanks, it suggests more of a dress watch than it does a sports watch.
Yeah, and there are watches that are sporty without being sports watches, and a great example of that would be something like the Vacheron 222, which I'm going to throw again into that like lapsed sports watch. The 222 in steel might have been a sports watch in the 70s, but does anyone think that the current historique version of it with the push-down crown and the 50-meter rating is something you'd want to take in the water?
I would think most people buying and wearing this watch are wearing it for, again, kind of that business casual aspect more so than anything.
Yeah, so the sports watch for me, I think something that would be considered like an arch sports watch would be like a Sinn Duo Chronograph 757 with a chronograph, a pilot's bezel, a tegmented case with DLC on it, 200-meter water resistance, 80,000 ampere per meter anti-magnetism, active dehumidification of the case, like all of these features, bright lume enough to light up a room. Like this is the kind of watch that we can all agree is a sports watch. Even though you don't pursue competitive sport with it, it's a tool watch, which is a term that often overlaps with sports watch. I hear that term all the time, tool watch. And I think what you're getting at with this idea of something being too finely finished or ornate or autologerie is that you can't really have that and something that is a tool watch at the same time. Because a tool can be used and abused. I don't think anyone would ever do that with a 222 or a jumbo.
I would also say a tool watch has to have a primary function. So, a slide rule on a Navitimer, perfect example. That has a function. You could argue the bezel on a dive watch tool. So I don't view something like a jumbo or a 222 as a tool watch or even a potential of a tool watch because there is effectively, save for the date, no complication.
Yeah, I mean, we talked at one point when I was with Jack Forster and we were shooting a video about eponymous watches and ambassador branded timepieces, I brought up the Longines Lindbergh, which was based on a Philip Van Doorn Weems navigation principle. And so that watch was a tool watch. It came out in 1931, and it featured correction for the equation of time, the ability to determine the hour angle, a mobile center dial that will allow you to synchronize a seconds hand of the watch to a radio beacon that would give you correct time to the second. So you've got all of these tools you need to use Weems's solar and celestial navigation principles inside an aircraft cockpit. And to this day, I would bet that 99% of the people who own a Weems watch or the Longines Lindbergh have no idea how it works, but it is a great example of a very purposeful watch. That's a tool watch.
That's a perfect example. I mean, it's nothing but absolute usable features for the intended wearer.
And I have a couple of fun, obscure ones. So back in 2011, Hublot decided to create a watch that is for polo players, and this was unveiled at the Polo Gold Cup in Stade. It was a limited edition of 500 pieces, and it was the limited edition Chucker Bang. So this was a watch that it was a big bang, so it had a metal case, a ceramic bezel, and then it had this crazy grill that you could fit to the dial. If you can't visualize this watch, if you've never seen it, think Cartier Pasha with a grill cover over the dial, and you're not far off.
Love the Cartier Pasha cage. So much fun.
And so this has been described lovingly as perhaps the ugliest watch of all time. And look, I think Hublot could probably laugh at this because they know it's application specific. But it's a titanium case with a ceramic bezel, and then you can add this grill in titanium that is designed to basically withstand the blow of a polo mallet. And they decided that, unlike the Reverso, they're not going to separate the shield from the crystal. They're going to combine them.
Now, when Tim says you can add it, what he means is Hublot can add it for you, as it is screwed to the bezel. I would wager to say you actually need a different set of screws than the original bezel screws due to the extra length of the titanium, which very likely has to be done at a Hublot service center.
Oh, yeah, and the fun thing is it all came in the same box.
Which is hilarious. I love it. I love little accessories like this. This is kitschy, but guess what? It is fun. This is cool. This is exactly the type of sports watch that I want to be discussing, I feel like. It's something that you never see. We've never been offered one of these.
And it has a 7-minute and 30-second timer that is unique to the model, and that is one period of play in a polo match. It's one period of play or chucka in a polo match, so it is the chucker bang. And so it's a unique chronograph, and it's got this crazy dial shield that can be applied. And so you've heard of watches that are built for polo or inspired by polo. Piaget has this polo that's got nothing to do with polo. This is a polo. This is both a tool watch and a sports watch.
Really cool pull.
Okay, so now Pablo McDonough, name didn't mean anything to me once upon a time, but the RM53 became my first and favorite Richard Mille that I ever saw. And
oh, yeah.
It looks a little bit like Johnny 5, the original one. Looks like Johnny 5 from Short Circuit.
It absolutely does.
And so it's got this unusual aesthetic. This was designed to basically be an indestructible watch, internally shock braced, externally, I believe it has a tungsten carbide carapace over the dials, which are made as small and recessed as possible. So the idea here is less to time a period of play in polo and more to survive the rigors of the sport. And here's the thing, I didn't realize how dangerous this sport was until I went to SIHH in 2018, and they had an interview with Pablo McDonough, and they talked about what he went through. And initially, RM gave him an RM10 just to play through a season with the RM10 on his wrist and see how it held up, and it got utterly destroyed. And he reflected on his experience where, as a child learning to play polo, he got his skull crushed. Yeah. And he said, at that point, I thought, maybe I don't like polo, which is completely reasonable. So if that's what it's going to do to your skull, and an RM10 gets trashed, well, what's the answer? Well, the answer was the RM5301, which was the follow-up to the weird hooded RM53. And the 01 used a laminated crystal on both sides. The idea being that it's almost like bulletproof glass. You can shatter it, but you can't perforate it. So you can break it, but it won't disintegrate, and you can't get through it. And then you had a movement inside a TPT case, which is a super hard composite, and then the movement is suspended on tensioned steel wires and pulleys. So it's almost like a hammock sitting in the middle of the case. And the idea is no matter how hard it gets whacked, you will not be able to break through the crystal, and you will not be able to damage the suspended movement.
RM gets a lot of hate here and there. I love the suspended movement pieces. I think they're so cool. I think it is a very modern way of installing a movement. And I think it's a really interesting case study on shock resistance.
It has 10 pulleys and 4 tensioners, and the steel, they're braided steel cables, so they're composite. They're not just one wire. They're only 1/4 of a millimeter in diameter. And this is $1 million watch, but I can tell you this. RM, when you meet with them, whoever it is, anyone from Richard Mille down to the person at the boutique level, they're always very approachable, always very friendly. I've never gotten attitude at SIHH. They were incredibly easy to work with. They gave me access despite the fact that I was a retailer who didn't carry their brand.
I've also always had good experience at RM boutiques, always.
Yeah, there's a lot to say about the people side of the RM brand, the events, the access, the way they treat you. Again, things like people who buy them used being told by the brand that they'll just give them some extra warranty just because, even though they're buying it secondhand, just stuff like that. This was a really cool watch, not just because of how light it was and how tough it was, but because it was a basically $1 million watch that came on a Velcro strap.
Yep.
I loved that.
I have to say, the RM53 is one of my favorite RMs. I was yesterday talking about Jackie Chan's watch collection with the team, and this is in Jackie Chan's collection, which is actually a prolific RM collection. It's fantastic. And this watch totally suits him also, just because, kind of the Hong Kong stuntman of all time.
Yeah, I think that Jackie Chan has broken enough bones to justify wearing a durable watch.
Could not agree more.
A non-controversial opinion. What's really cool is every once in a while you encounter sports watches that are so idiosyncratic you would never imagine that the need existed. A great example would be the Sinn 3006 Hunter's Chronograph. So in Germany, I mean, we all understand hunting. You don't really need a watch when you're out in the woods. Like, what does it matter? If you're hunting something that appears at night, wait for the sun to go down.
You kind of want to lose track of time, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you're hunting something that's, crepuscular, like, only active at sunset or dawn, well, go out then. But in Germany, they have a law that says you can't hunt with artificial light. So you can't bring giant floodlights to hunt deer. It's too disruptive to the natural environment.
I kind of like that law.
I like that too. But it does beg the question, where does the light come from? And the light comes from a full moon. So Sinn created this hunter's chronograph with a giant luminescent moon phase. It's got a calendar, it's got a chronograph, it's tegmented, it's water resistant, it's super cool, it's full of features. But its standout feature is that it has a huge luminescent moon phase. So you know when you've got that maximum natural light to hunt nocturnal prey.
Now, if you're in Germany, can you run around at night with a set of quads on?
My guess is no.
No artificial light.
Maybe. It's almost like those old LA Gear lights shoes from the early 1990s.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to take those hunting? Would you want to?
Listen, if you've got the $20,000 that it's going to take to get you a set of quads, then I'm sure you could probably get away with it.
Yeah, okay. We'll leave that one in terms of X. And I just thought that was really cool. Like, that is a sports watch specifically for the sport of hunting according to the rules in one nation.
That's very cool. That's a really, really cool specific. I think that's, I was totally unaware of that law. I learn something new every time we record this podcast. But that's such a cool little detail. I'm not a hunter, but that is, I can't argue with how cool that is.
It's a really, really good looking watch too. If you find one of these, go for it. All the features it's got in addition to the moon phase, it's one of those watches where Sinn delivers a lot of value despite not having a manufacturer movement. It's all the other technologies that they add. And you got the Alain Prost. Tell us about that.
This was going to be my next kind of subject to go into kind of very specific dedicated sports watches. And Tim, you are the only person that should be describing this watch. Actually, I got to pass the mic to you.
Okay, so Alain Prost is famous as a Formula One driver and a multiple champion in the genre. So you would think that if a person who is world famous for driving Formula One cars were to have a watch that is branded Alain Prost by Richard Mille, who is a prolific collector of Formula One cars, you would think that this would be some sort of motorsports watch, but instead, Prost is an avid cyclist, and he created a Richard Mille that is designed to help you track your cycling.
This is one of the funkier Richard Milles, too.
It's like this was a setup, a race car driver from a brand that claims to be a racing machine for your wrist, and the whole thing is to log your cycling miles. And bicycle miles, not even like Moto Grand Prix. And it is a phenomenally expensive 30-piece limited edition. It's shock resistant. It's an unusual expression of an RM watch because it's almost shaped like the blades of a Japanese fan. Like, it's not symmetrical from side to side. It's got a distinct curvature from one side to the other that runs from top to bottom on your wrist. And so the side, assuming you're wearing this conventionally, the crown is going to be facing towards your knuckles if it's on your left hand. And so the broad side is going to be facing towards your hand. The narrow side is going to be facing towards your inner arm. And you're going to have this little ticker that allows you to log all of your miles or kilometers on a bicycle. And I got to be honest, I feel like there's maybe 2 or 3 different devices on your body and your bike these days that could do the exact same thing. But there is something wonderfully nostalgic about having a purely mechanical logging device, almost like an old pedometer. It's pardon me now, I'm going to advise that Prost himself wears this on his right hand. So when I talk about it being on your left hand, it may be that it is intended to be worn righty.
I think due to the K shape, it absolutely is intended to be worn righty, because if you think about it, granted you should be straight wrist on your handlebars for the most part, but if you think about it, if you move your hand, the top of your hand will come into the curved side.
The weird part, though, is that if you read it from left to right, like all Western text and numbers, the numbers are only in the correct order if it is on your left-hand wrist. So the weird thing is that Prost, here's a picture of it, right? So now let's imagine this on my wrist here. I'm reading from left to right, so I'm reading from left to right, so you can see the number this way, right?
Yep.
Now, if I were putting this on my other wrist, I feel like I would be reading it now upside down.
I don't know that I'd have a problem with that, to be honest with you.
You're okay with reading it upside down?
I wear a tracker on my right wrist, so I'm kind of used to it, I think, maybe. But I don't think that I would view it as upside down necessarily. Actually, if I'm being honest, the way it's angled, I would almost think it would feel a little more awkward on the left wrist.
It's a weird thing.
It is very strange.
It's a strange shape, and then he makes it weirder by wearing it the way he does.
So, Tim, how on God's green earth does this work?
You basically just tap it.
Just click it,
You
right?
just click, 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 click. So presumably it's
just a counter.
It's just a counter.
I love it. Don't get me wrong, but
it's a very expensive counter. Okay. So, that's a great example of an unexpected ambassadorship, because Prost and Senna, they're always going to be tied inextricably together for that 1988 year at McLaren, when I think they won every race except the one where they crashed into each other. I think that was 88. But again, it's a cycling watch. So a case where a watch and its ambassador were much more closely aligned with the ambassador's area of expertise would be the famed 2005 Tag Heuer Professional Golf Watch. Now, this watch was endorsed by Tiger Woods back when Tiger's stock was kind of at its peak. It was an 8,000-piece limited edition, and it was made of a combination of titanium stainless steel, and it had silicone rubber strap. It had a unique case that sort of opened up a bit like the Piaget Upstream.
Yep.
And it was all said to be 5,000 G shock resistant, which is at a much lower price, equal to what the RM5301 Pablo McDonough was with the 10 pulleys and 4 tensioners. So if you want that kind of durability on the cheap, this is the way to go. Now, it is quartz, so the challenge of making it shock resistant is somewhat less. But they did mention that when it was released, the 5000G is said to be 45 times more shock than received by a golf swing when it collides with the ball. So this watch has a lot to recommend it, largely due to the unconventional shape and the weird interaction of the case and the clasp, where the case effectively is the clasp. And all of this, with the full strap, is 55 grams, which is right about what a aluminum Octasport from FP Journe weighs on the rubber strap. So if you can think of that mass-wise, that is your comparison for this Tag Heuer golf watch. And I just thought this was pretty cool, because this is a great example of the ambassador and his profession aligning with the watch's use, and the thing actually being designed properly to withstand golf play. Like, this is not just something that Tiger Woods endorses. Like, remember when, for God knows how long, Tudor put Tiger on the dial of seemingly every watch? That didn't age well. But those had nothing to do with him, whereas this was a professional golf watch designed for golf, endorsed by a guy who's a very good golf player.
It's always interesting to me that Tag has chosen Monaco as their experimental line, because the Monaco 24 is, I wouldn't call it, anything but distantly related to the piece that you were just talking about, but has remarkable shock resistance and experimental systems experimental systems to achieve that shock resistance.
Yeah, and various versions of the Monaco, at a bare minimum, it's a chronograph, which is always appropriate for motorsports, but certain versions in the modern era, in the 21st century, have included shock absorbers inside the case that make it even more appropriate for extreme applications.
I was told at the Tag Heuer boutique in King of Prussia that you can throw this. The salesperson said, you can take this watch outside right now to our parking garage and throw this off the top floor and it'll be fine. And I said to him, it'll be fine? And he said, well, it won't break.
And what's kind of nice is that super shock resistant Monaco 24 chronograph isn't just super shock resistant and water resistant, but it gets the sort of burnished credential of a legitimate movement. So this is not some 7750 or modular 2892. It's a Zenith El Primero, which is exactly what you want in something like that. That is a great chronograph caliber in a great chronograph design in its most aggressive form. So if you want to watch for motorsports, this is a great example of mechanical watchmaking actually getting the job done. I would also say it's important to note that there are some really extreme applications where the watch, and this is sort of along the lines of the Heuer golf watch, but the watch might not sit right with horological purists because it's quartz. But if you want a real pilot's watch today, like something that a pilot would actually use for something more than status in the ready room, then you want like a Breitling Aerospace.
Yep.
Where you've got 2 time zones, 12 24-hour format selectable, analog digital selectable, backlights, audible readouts of time, chronographs, elapsed timers, countdown timers, multilingual calendar systems, an alarm that's loud enough to be heard over the din of an aircraft cockpit. I'll throw the X33 Skywalker, the Omega X33 Skywalker into that discussion, but something like a Breitling Aerospace is what a pilot today would buy if he really wanted his watch to be adapted for his profession. And yeah, it's quartz. It's a quartz chronometer. It is incredibly accurate. We're talking like 10 seconds a year. It's thermocompensated. And the Aerospace is 100 meters, which the X33 is not. So I would say the Aerospace is probably the best all-around sports watch you can buy. It's still luxury horology. We're still talking 4-figure prices, but it's quartz.
Where do you think, and I know that our listeners love when we bring up this brand, where do you think the like Mr. G-Shocks fit into this category?
I mean, I think every G-Shock is a sports watch in the barest sense that it's durable. Like for general durability, a G-Shock is almost like the affordable quartz version of something like an Aqua Terra. At any, like a DW 5600, yeah, with GA 2100, that's a sports watch. But now you can also get some that are very tailored towards specific professions or
tidal calculators, weird complications.
Yeah, I remember at one point there was a Casio in the 90s that had GPS. Battery had like 6 hours of power or something like that. But there are some that are used by military units. Like this is where no serious Navy SEAL is going to. He might have a Rolex and he might even wear it in combat. But if he's going to wear a watch specifically for the job as opposed to just everyday carry, it's going to be like a Timex Ironman or a G-Shock. And I know this. I was in the Navy. I saw what those guys used. Many of them did have Rolex and would even wear them. But if the watch itself had to have a role in the mission, it was going to be like a digital, multifunction, durable watch.
Well, in a situation like that, you have to be able to synchronize with your team, right? So that is what G-Shock is perfect for.
And with mission control, like if there's two-way communications, you and whatever spec war admiral who's directing the operation from the United States or like CENTCOM command, that person is going to have like the same time on his watch, or at least the same time on the mission timer. You need to have more than just like local time. You all have to be on the same program. And that's particularly important if you're not in direct communication, because a lot of times that's not possible for practical and security reasons. And I've met a lot of SEALs and people who are SWCS. SWCS is, unfortunately, they go through all the same swim tests, I think, as the SEALs, but they're Special Warfare Craft Combatant Commandos. No, they are Special Warfare Craft Combatant Crewmen, SWCS. And so they are the other U.S. Navy Special Force, the one you never hear about. But yeah, they were using the same kind of stuff. And I had a G-Shock at the time, and the G-Shock I had from 1998 was very similar to what they were using in like 2010, 11, 12. So those are like real tool watches. So you ask me Mr. G, G-Shock, Metal G, all that stuff. Anything that's G-Shock is a legitimate sports watch. Even Baby G is more of a sports watch than a Royal Oak Jumbo.
The Swix logo is awesome. It's an anchor with an old flintlock pistol and a scabbard, or not a scabbard, excuse me, a cutlass crossing. It's so cool.
It really is. I think the only, and we're getting a little bit off topic here, but I think explosive ordnance disposal has by far the best warfare device. And I'm trying to find a picture of it right here. But I remember at one point they had like one with a bomb and a lightning bolt, and
Oh, that's awesome.
it was like, it's like someone just sat down and they're like, we need everything
yeah, I
cool.
see him here. That's very cool.
Yeah, we need everything cool on one warfare device.
Man.
And, in the Navy, when you qualify in your profession within the Navy, you get your pin. And so, yeah, it's laurels, a bomb, and some versions, it's laurels, a bomb, a star, and 2 lightning bolts.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's like someone designing a pin to be as awesome as possible. Yeah, so we're getting sidetracked there. But if you're in those professions, you're probably not wearing a luxury watch for the job. Now, a great example of a watch that was designed for a sport that was really designed with the sport's competitors in mind was the JLC Amvox 2 of 2006. Let's say you're wearing full kit, you're at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and JLC did sponsor Aston Martin for a couple of years, so that's where this partnership came from. Well, if you're wearing gloves, screw-down crowns, and maybe even push-down crowns are just going to be too small a target. They're tough to manipulate, they're tough to grab, so you might decide that you need a bigger target. And so JLC looked at this problem and they said, yeah, if you're wearing a glove, you're probably not going to be able to operate a conventional chronograph. And since both crewmen and drivers wear gloves, they came up with this idea of an articulating case where tapping the top of the crystal by 12 o'clock starts and stops it, and topping 6 o'clock at the bottom resets it. And you would swear that this would never work because it's on a fleshy base, and you'd think that it would move around on the wrist. It would be tough to get it to cycle. It would be tough to operate. No, not at all.
Not at all.
It pivots on ball bearings. It's super crisp. The function absolutely works.
I judge chronographs by the tactile feel of the activation, and this has that click, that definite chronograph click and reset that us as mechanical watch lovers have grown to understand, love, and appreciate. And it's so cool. This is the first outside of the box chrono in a century.
I would say that with this mechanism, I've always, and you've heard this before if you follow my social media, I said if RM developed this, it would have cost 6 figures. And I don't mean like 100,000 either.
$895,000 USD.
Yeah, look what the RM Lifestyle Chrono, the strategically named Lifestyle Chrono costs, and that is entirely orthodox in its construction. The JLC was brilliant, and they even answered questions like, what do I do to prevent accidental resetting or accidental halting of the count? And so there's a case lock. There's this slider that allows you to lock out the reset, enable all functions, or lock out the stop-start, and it works beautifully. And the Amvox 2 is something I think you could still buy used for under 10 grand. And this is a watch that was 16,000 back in the 2000s, so you calculate your inflation. It would be a very expensive watch today. You can buy it for a song. I've even sent mine in at one point for service, and I was shocked. This was granted back in 2014, but the service came back at less than $1,000.
No joke.
No, really, yeah. And that's with the articulated case, the unconventional mechanism, a twin barrel movement. I was actually pretty impressed by that. So even if it's like $1,100, $1,200 today, that's still very reasonable.
Watch is awesome. These have come up a little bit, actually, which is surprising for a piece like this. These are somewhere in the mid-teens now.
So they're getting back to where the retail was 20 years ago.
Which I'm happy to see because this is kind of a prolific chrono.
You know what's interesting? The El Primero, for its prolific association with many brands of chronograph, I don't really associate it with motorsports except in its occasional Tag Heuer cameos and in the Rolex Daytona. When I think of Zenith watches with the El Primero, I generally think of watches that are sort of like all-arounders or dress chronographs.
Kind of
like
a gentleman's chrono.
Yeah, like the Chronomaster. The Chronomaster is not something that you imagine is inextricably linked to racing a car or a motorcycle.
Yeah, no. And you know, that's part of kind of what makes modern Zenith interesting, is that they don't purport to be a part of that either.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because for the most part, their sportiest watches now tend to be
Defy.
Divers.
Yeah.
Like revivals and Defy divers, Defy extreme divers. So thinking about icon watches now, and I did just mention the El Primero because it's unusual for a chronograph caliber to almost completely evade associations with motorsports. And other than the Rolex link and the Tag Heuer usage, it almost always does. Okay. Why is it that the icons of so many brands are sports watches or lapsed sports watches? IWC, the pilot's watches. Omega, the Speedmaster Professional. Any number of Rolexes.
It's where
The Patek Nautilus. The Royal Oak Offshore.
I would argue it's
The
where
Navitimer.
most of their history was made.
Is it just that it's harder to tell a story about a dress watch? Is that
I think, and take this with a grain of salt. I think unless you say, you know,
And the reverso too, it came from a sporting background.
unless you say like, you know, this dress, and even if you do at this point, unless you say, you know, this dress watch was worn by, I can't even think of a universally loved president. This dress watch was worn by Abraham Lincoln. You know, there's not really that many storied dress watches in the sense of, you get a lot of storied sports watches. This watch went to Everest. This watch went to space. This watch is on the racetrack. This watch went to the depth of the ocean. This type of history and this type of forward reach in terms of technology is where a lot of these brands really made their bed, because they weren't reaching in terms of the cutting edge with dress watches, at least in the 20th century, we could argue.
Oh, yeah, and I would agree with you. And I would just bring back something that Roger Ruger, who's been an occasional program partner on my Monday show, he said that at this point in his life, he's been editor-in-chief of Watch Time, and he's run their events. He says he gravitates towards watches that have a compelling story behind them. And I really do get the sense that unless there's just some endlessly charismatic figure associated with your dress watch, it's easier to tell a story around a sports watch and not have that story be entirely dependent on one person who may be an uninsurable ambassador.
I would say, yeah. I would say dress watches too tend to have more to do with potentially the watchmaker and the brand's history or early legacy than, again, the future, the forward motion.
Yeah, and it's interesting to just think about the great dress watches, the Portugueser, the Calatrava, that is all of them.
And look at like a subsect of Calatrava, like the Gilbert pieces, right? The Disco Volante. Like there's interesting corners in there, but still none of those have storied past.
And maybe that's why, just because it's easier to tell a story around a sports watch, maybe that's one of the reasons why Audemars Piguet has always struggled with dress watches in the modern era. And as late as the 90s, I would still say that they had a reasonable division between Royal Oaks and dress watches. But over time, especially when you don't have an unchanging core dress watch model, they had the Huitièmes, then they had the Classics, then they had the Millenary, the Jules Audemars, the Edouard Piguet. They discontinued those. They brought in the Code 1159. Without some sort of story to tell that involves heroism or daring or a person who broke barriers or an application that's romantic, it is just really hard. Vacheron with the Patrimony and the Traditionnel, and who do you associate with those? What do you associate with those? You look at them and you're like, nice.
And I honestly think that's why dress watches are wavering a little bit in terms of what's popular.
So let's look at the rare successes, like the exceptions to the rule. Régep Régepi with the Chronomètre Contemporain and the 2, Simon Brett with the Chronomètre Artisan, and everything F. P. Journes made. it's mostly because the story that's told around those watches is them.
Yes, the watchmakers themselves. And that's like what I was saying earlier with, kind of some of the designations of the dress watches. That is what's interesting now. A watchmaker with something to say orologically.
And it does not seem that other than Richard Mille, there are a lot of really big horlogerie independents breaking in or making their names with sports watches. De Bethune has them, Journe has them, they're out there, they exist. But I do not get the sense that these new creators are breaking in with that stuff. Remy Coultz doesn't make sports watches, Tauafrey doesn't make sports watches, Felipe Pikulik, Torsti Leine, they don't make sports watches. It seems like the standard model to get into the indie space is not to make a sports watch.
I would argue too that it's not necessarily to make a dress watch; it's to make a casual complications.
That or just something that is very simple and pure. Like, I do think they've learned from Philippe Dufour and Recep Redzepi that you want to have the most orthodox possible, like, mid-20th century valet de jour dress watch in a slightly larger size. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing. If you want to tell a story around a dress watch, it has to almost be a living person who made it. Now, there are some watches that are associated with individuals like Gianni Agnelli and various dress Patek Philippe's. But even then, you're talking about something that's a niche where the person who is like buying a Patek Philippe for the first time probably doesn't know who he is. And, the Waco type collector already knows what he likes. He doesn't need to be sold. The kind of guy who would know who Gianni Agnelli is probably doesn't need to be sold on the romance of, like, I don't know, 1415.
I forget the gentleman's name. I think it starts with a G, but he's a prolific collector of vintage Calatrava. He's kind of jacked. Is it Alfredo something?
Is he Italian?
He is Italian, and I'm totally blanking on his name. But he's an interesting guy who is just, a prolific collector of non-complicated Calatravas. Is that his name? Alfredo Parmico, is that it?
Paramico?
I believe that might be him.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
He's an Italian collector,
Yep.
yeah.
That's something that is, that's something that's very interesting to me because I would expect a guy like this to be into sports watches, but he's prolifically into Calatrava.
Okay, so let's get back to like where we started with the sports watches. I think we've agreed that there's no argument if it's used as a tool for a specific application. There's no argument if it's actually used in pursuit of a sport. And there's less of an argument if it has a lot of water resistance, shock resistance, and anti-magnetism. Where we get into the weeds and there's confusion is when you have a sports watch that's not application specific, has very little water resistance, and may be a little bit frumpy or vintage. What I would call either a sporty watch, or in the case of something like a Santos Dumont or a Reverso, a lapsed sports watch. At the end of the day, I think sports watches are also a state of mind. I think the fact is a lot of people don't get dressed up anymore. When was the last time you knew anyone who wore a cummerbund? So my point
Senior
there,
prom.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe like a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah or something. But my point is that there, you've got a watch you can wear more often. Like a yellow gold Calatrava, there may come a day when people feel comfortable wearing that with a t-shirt, but the assumption is not the base case. The base case is that you have to dress up to wear some of these dress watches. And if you look at photos of human beings through the years, like since we've had daguerreotypes in the early 19th century, and illustrations of previous times, from like the year 1500 to the present, every portrayal of human beings includes less and less clothing. And over time, particularly in the 20th century, we became comfortable with the idea that you would go to work with short sleeves, without a tie, in attire that could plausibly be called casual. And at the hedge funds and the tech companies and the startups of the world, you're just not going to be dressing formally, and a dress watch does not feel natural.
Yeah. And I think, too, there's the argument that, the ultimate dress watch to a black tie event, for example, is no watch.
Yeah, I mean, I would
Which
say
I have
that's
to
the
say-
European.
Yeah. Which I have to say, I kind of agree with that to a certain point. And I like, I'm I'm one that likes watches, but if you're in the most formal of formal events, you shouldn't be worried about what time it is.
Yeah, I've had many people who are European and Asian who come from a more conservative culture tell me that the assumption is when you wear black tie, whether it's black tie or bow tie, you do not wear a watch.
Yeah. Yep.
In America, there's this assumption that you wear a dress watch. And that's very common. I think if you're going to wear a watch with a tux or general high formal attire, the consensus I've found with collectors out of Hong Kong, Singapore, Italy, Austria, Switzerland, Germany, it's always been you wear the most basic, discreet, and simple watch possible. Think a JLC Master Ultra Thin 34, 2 hands, manual wind, very compact.
Yep. Absolutely. Patek 3520, 5120.
And if you're a baller, 3939.
Oh, if only.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the thing. Like at the extreme of formality, you don't wear the watch.
Yep.
I think what the dress watch needs to break through is a custom of wearing purpose-built dress watches casually. I think it needs to get to the point where you feel like if you do work at that AI startup, you can show up wearing a 5227J on an ostrich strap, and you're wearing cargo shorts and a polo shirt, and that's completely acceptable.
You just jogged something in my brain. I actually think people... I think people think that modern dress watches are not as durable as they are too. And modern dress watches have not all the shock resistance and water resistance of sports watches, obviously, but they have modern water resistance and shock resistance.
Yeah, there's also a little bit of a humor to this idea that you're going to wear your Nautilus all the time, but the 5227 with the same caliber 324 SC, you've got to be so careful.
Yes.
You can't be careful enough. Don't take a chance.
So I am of the mind that the strap is what makes the watch dressy or not. If you are wearing an alligator strap that is shiny, that is dressy.
Yeah, if you're wearing some sort of textile strap or a NATO, you're immediately knocking it down a notch.
A purlon, a calf leather, an ostrich leather, anything that's not gator and patent. Honestly, gator is a little too dressy for me personally. I mean, you guys see how I dress, but a calf is a perfect option.
If you were to wear that 5227J and put it on a red Stingray leather strap, that would be...
It's an outfit piece at that point. It's no longer a dress watch.
You're making a statement. You're leading with your wrist. You're being very flamboyant and raffish. You're, as Waco would say, the rake. And then you can wear that watch casually. And really... there's no reason not to. When we get to that point where a dress watch can be the go-to that you grab by default and take anywhere, not just in formal attire, that is like the final frontier for dress watches. That is why sports watches have such this dominance in mindshare.
One of my favorite examples of a very dressy watch being casually worn, I got to meet the niece of one of our ex-presidents at one of our stores. Who is just a gem. She was remarkably nice, albeit a little bit of a mess, but I loved her. I thought she was awesome. She came in kind of looking rock and roll. She did have a black eye when she came in, so super rock and roll. And she had what I assume to be either 28 to 32 millimeter Calatrava with a hobnail bezel on a patent alligator leather strap that had broken in 2 places, and she stapled it back together.
Awesome.
And was wearing it on her wrist, and I fell in love. Like, it was just one of those things. It's just like, no. That is so rock and roll. That is so cool.
That really is.
The watch couldn't have been dressier.
So subversive.
It's so cool. And it's like, that's my favorite instance of a dress watch being made casual.
Now, speaking of sports watches, you're preaching to the choir here. We're both wearing sports watches today. So I'm wearing...
Tell me about yours. This is new for you.
Yeah, this is a recent arrival from Moser of Schaffhausen. I've always loved Moser, and I've been like an advocate for them since the Watch You Want days when we didn't even have them to sell. But I always said that it's a fun brand run by approachable, decent people that makes watches that are good value. And For a long time, they only made precious metal, which made it a little bit tough. This now in steel is a size I can wear. Their original Pioneer was precious metal and 42.8 back in 2015. And this is the Pioneer Center Second Cosmic Green. So it's a cosmic green dial, which is my favorite color. It's stainless steel, which is everyday durable. And then it is a 40 millimeter case, which is something that's relatively new for the Pioneer as of 2023. Yeah. You've got a watch that I can wear well. It's got the new HMC 201 movement, which is the 200, but made to look better. It was always technically accomplished. Now it looks genuinely cool. I got the perforated rubber strap. I got the pin buckle. Claudio, who's their man in the United States, Edouard and Bertrand over in Switzerland, the Meilland family, their whole team, they've always been great people. And I would say it's one of those brands you buy because first you believe in the people, and you know that makes it that much easier to embrace the product. I love everything about this watch, and I've been wearing it nonstop for the last 2 weeks since I got it.
I think they nailed it with that size. If my Pioneer were the 40 millimeter, I would undoubtedly still have it.
Yeah, and the green is perfect for me.
It's so good.
Look at this. You're looking at this thing on a camera, and you know who made it, even though there is no visible logo. It's there in clear lacquer. I can barely see it from 5 inches away.
Tim, I don't know if this is too flashy for you, but they make an orange strap for that.
I would do that in a heartbeat.
And it's awesome. I had one on mine. I absolutely loved it.
And I have no negative associations with green and orange. Maybe Miami Dolphins, maybe. But other than that, I can't think of anything really offensive. It's not like there's some sports team I really despise.
Yeah, I can't either.
Like I don't feel that strongly about the Dolphins.
And the Dolphins is more of a baby blue, right?
Or maybe like a teal?
Teal. Yep.
Yeah,
yep.
So I'm cool with this. It's not like I'm a Yankees fan and the watch would be Mets colors.
Yeah.
So, I feel just fine there. Yeah, this is a great watch, and it's a sports watch. It's 120 meters water resistant, so it is what we would call an all-around durable piece. But guys, let us know in the comments below the video, what do you consider a sports watch? We said made for a sport, used as a tool for a profession, generally durable or sporty in a vague sense. So you let us know, what do you consider to be a sports watch, and what do dress watches need to do to break through? Armand, if people want to reach out to you, how do they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at It's Me Armand, or you can shoot me an email directly, armand@the1916company.com.
And I am Tim_Masso on Instagram. And until next time, time out.